Well,
yeah. So I mean,
sorry, Diane, what you saying?
I said we don't really need to be seen on this. We can just get Dee to record it, and then people can look at it. And if we need to ask questions later.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, David will be asking you questions a bit later. So
That's
we'll
fine.
just mute and
Okay.
listen to you. And
So I'm just going to go through the first thing I'm going to go through is called home screen improvements. Now, in iOS 14, which is the latest version of I'm not talking now. 14 is the actual version of the operating system, whereas the 0.1, 0.21 is a update to the operating system for security reasons. So, for all intents and purposes, the actual functionality remains the same. So I want to basically address that first, because people will not necessarily know that. So they're going to say, well, 14, I've got 14.2.3.16 or whatever. Now, every September when they come out with a new handset or a new phone, Apple tends to update the operating system. And the latest incarnation of that operating system is 14. Now, not all handsets are compatible with iOS 14, depending on the age of the handset. That's a separate issue in itself. However, and every iteration, so every time they come out with a new iOS, they improve upon the functionality, and they take into account the new functionality of the new handsets. So the first thing I'm going to look at is what they call home screen improvements in iOS 14. Now, iOS 14, their widgets are no longer relegated to today. Now, widget is something you have on your home screen.
Sorry, just to interrupt again. Do you want to share the screen? Is there any presentation?
No, because I'm doing I've got a separate thing on my iPad. I sort of done it on that, but I'm going to send the links to you, Phil, anyway, for this information. I'll send the links to it, send the links for it, so people can look at it in much more detail. So I've narrowed it down to about three kind of, what I'm going through at the moment is what they call a fully comprehensive view of iOS 14. I'm not going to cover every single detail because it goes into, I'm going to cover, the new additions, how to use the features, and basically then I'm going to go into something else. So what I'm talking about now is essentially widgets. Now, a widget, basically, what a widget is effectively it's a relatively simple and easy to use software application or component, essentially, of one or more different software platforms. So essentially, you just tap on it and you can get to, I don't know, weather or something. Now, the way in which iOS 14 works, you're able to effectively make things even better by having a set of widgets that you commonly use. For example, if you wanted to use, a particular app, and the widget allows you to do that. If you swipe right on your handset, I can get my handset out. So essentially, you'll come to a screen where you will have a set of Siri suggestions, and if you go further down, you have a set of widgets. And I don't know if you can see that, so we can't really see it because I've got the background. But anyway, what will happen is you have a set of widgets you commonly use, which you can add to this screen. So you swipe right. If you scroll down, that's very much like the Android kind of setup they have had in the past, and they've developed that for the iOS 14. Now you can switch between those without having to go through all your apps. If you've got, like me, you've got a lot of apps on your iPhone for various things that you might create, you are able to essentially get access to them quickly and at a glance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to take a screenshot of this. And I'm going to send that to Phil later. So that's basically gives you an idea. Now, the other thing that iOS 14 allows you to do is something called a smart stack of widgets. And what that is basically your most commonly used widgets are the ones that it will rotate. So for example, let's say 1 week you're using Uber for more than you were using the week before, it will place Uber in that commonly what I call a smart stack of widgets. It will rotate those depending on your usage patterns. So it basically monitors how you're using your widgets, and it will give you the access to those widgets quicker depending on the amount of utilization that you have. You can, of course, edit a smart stack to your needs, depending on what you want to add or subtract. And the other, that's very useful to have. Now, the other thing that I have in the iOS 14, I don't know how many people have explored their the operating system, is something called, I'm not talking about your, by the way, this is to do with the iPhone. I'm not addressing anything to do with the laptop. That's something else I can look into, because the laptops are a whole different aspect of it. And depending on how many people want to actually go into that, I'm able to do a session on that. You can let me know later. For the app, those of us who use Apple MacBooks and use the computers, I don't know how many of they are in the group, but that's something I'm happy to accommodate later. So the app library is another new addition to iOS 14. I say new edition, you know, it's been out now since September. It's had several updates since then. I think there's an update that's available now, which I'll come to a little later on. Now, that basically gives you a view of everything that's available in one single screen. So I'm going to take a screenshot of that again, and then I'm going to also send that to Phil. Now, what the app library is, it breaks everything down to social, recently used. It break it down for you again on usage patterns, and it essentially gives you access to those apps like news, media, travel, that sort of stuff will be categorized. Now, again, you can edit that as you see fit, and you can add new categories as you see fit. You can customize it as you see fit. I believe that's possible to have that. Now, essentially, what you can also do with you can add remove apps from, I said, from the home screen without deleting them, and instead use the app library to access them. So you effectively, all the apps that you would have would be available unless they're customized apps. For example, you might have a shortcut to a website which you place as a widget or as a screen on your iPhone. That won't necessarily be copied over to the to your app library. So you need to be mindful of that. That's when you physically go to a website, so because you want to easily access it. For example, you might want to go to a particular website for reference purposes, and you just create because you can create a shortcut on your device to enable you to do that. The shortcut is different from actually having an app. It's a different thing altogether. Now, if you have lots of apps installed, you're going to have multiple home screens. And the good thing about this iOS 14 is you can customize that as you see fit. So for example, if you've got your notes and your shopping list, and you can access that easily, you know where it is, because you can basically create it to suit your needs. Now, there's a new thing that's iOS 14 included, or something called app clips. And essentially an app clip is a toned down version of an app, a complete app that only requires 10 megabyte of storage. Now that's very useful because effectively it also supports the signing with Apple and Apple Pay integration. Now app clips can only be installed by tapping on you sometimes have what they call NFC scanning or QR codes. Effectively, that means that you're able to have your memory protected on the iPhone. Because if you've got, I know the older iPhones used to have 64 meg or 32 meg. The newer ones have, I think, a minimum of 128 GB going forward. So and the apps do take up a lot of space. Now, NFC stands for near field communication. And an example of near field communication is when you go to a Marks and Spencer's, you go to a petrol station. Now everyone's asking you to pay with contactless payment. If you don't use your debit card and you have your debit card stored on your device, you will effectively use your phone. You double tap your button and you put the device next to the basically the payment terminal, and it automatically recognizes your device. That's an example of what we call an NFC tag. Effectively, what NFC is, that's called near field communication. That's basically where your device is communicating with it. That's just as a side bit of information. Just wondering what, if people are wondering what NFC stands for. Now, the next thing I'm going to discuss is the Translate app, which I think is very useful for someone who's learning languages. I've checked out the Translate app. It's not too bad. I mean, if you're learning a language, it doesn't replace the need to download, something like Babel or, LingQ or whatever you want to use. It's just an additional bit of, it's an interface by which you can actually translation app. It supports, at the time it came out, it supported 11 languages. I think that's increased somewhat now. I'm not sure the exact amount. The other thing that the app supports is a conversation mode. I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't really checked out a conversation mode. I asked a friend of mine who has used it, and he told me that it's hit and miss because it depends on how quickly the individual is speaking, the dialect, whether or not they've got a strong accent, whether these sorts of things come into play. He said, but it's something that they're further improving on. But it's just good to know that you've got it. Now, the other thing that Apple supports, and this is something that people who've got cars who use, like, basically, you can turn your phone or watch into a virtual car key. Now, I don't know whether or not UK manufacturers support this, so that's something that you'd have to check out with your actual manufacturer of your vehicle. But I do know that's something that was developing. So it enables you to basically share messages with others, share car keys, restrictions, but that all depends on the software that's installed and what have you. I'm just going to check. There's a chat here. Let's bear with me. You just mentioned. Yes, Farouk. The answer to that question is I will send a link of this presentation to Phil, where you can click on it and you can check on the supported languages. It changes it changes quite regularly. I don't know how many languages it supports. I'll have to have a look. I'm sure French is supported. It's a common language, so you've got no worries there. I don't know if it supports. I'm not sure if it supports some of the other languages. I would imagine Mandarin is supported, Cantonese, those sorts of languages when it first came out. But it's a good question. I'll have to find out how many there are. Now, one of the other things that basically that was improved with iOS 14 was UI, which is user interface improvements. Now, there is a lot more functionality between Siri and the user interface, which Diane can tell you, because Diane uses dictation on when she's doing a shopping list, and she finds it very useful. So actually, that's a question for Diane when I finish and questions are asked. That I know the question is supposed to be directed to me, but Diane has a lot of experience in using dictation mode in her iPhone. She's been doing it for several years now. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is whether that has improved in her opinion with the new operating system that Apple have come with. Is she finding it easier? Is she finding that basically when she vocalizes, it's the OCR, the character recognition is better, and she's able to get a quicker it's quicker to actually understand her than it was before. I think it's very useful because with people who've got dexterity problems, especially with arthritis, it's very useful to have that. And I think manufacturers are now moving towards that. So you can move towards a system. And the only thing that I think they need to develop is the background noise cancellation. You have that on headphones. And I think if they develop that for your handsets, it would be fantastic because it takes it a whole new level. So I think that's a very useful feature to have. The other thing you can do with the iOS 14 is it will no longer display incoming call notifications in full screen mode. In fact, instead there will be banners on your iPhone. So you get like a banner across telling you FaceTime. You can even get third-party voice over IP apps. So you've also got support for that. And you've got support for Skype, Viber, probably Telegram now, and you've got I think there's quite a few now you've got that have come out since WhatsApp made a mess of the sort of privacy regulations. There's quite a few. I think Telegram's widely used now, and there's Signal as well. So you've got a choice. I'm not sure whether they support those, but I'm sure that's something that will be integrated into them later. Now, basically, the other thing I was going to go through now is, let me have a look at my list. Bear with me. So the release date of iOS 14 was September the 16th, 2020. And we are now at iOS 14.5, which is essentially which was launched in March 2021. Now, I'm able to go through the various functionality of 14.5. I can do that in a minute. So when I send this link to Phil, this lists everything, Farouk, for your information. It lists you everything from home screen improvements to iOS 14 problems and issues. It also gives you the updates for iOS 14.5. It's a very comprehensive. It's the most comprehensive one I've seen when I was doing my research in the last week or so of iOS. And the good thing about it is you don't have to put your email address in. You don't have to put your phone number, all that rubbish in. You're able to access the information. It's nicely presented and it's relatively easy to follow for the non-techie. In fact, it's very well organized. It's a really nice way of organizing. Now, the next thing I was going to go through was the general improvements and features. Now, the general improvements and features, iOS comes with numerous general improvements, and I suppose that ones that the ones that are sort of have been handpicked by this particular link I'm going to send, or this particular article I'm referring to is for first thing is emoji picker. Now, I don't know whether or not emoji pickers are really sort of what people of a certain age use, but effectively with the emoji picker, you're able to look for a commonly used word or a face expression, and you present it from a relevant emoji to actually choose from. You can now watch YouTube in 4K on iOS 14. Depending on where you are, obviously 4K is data intensive. So if you haven't got data allowance, or if you've got one, it's a case of you're going to be streaming the data. I would imagine you won't be downloading it to your handset because you're going to be using gargantuan amounts of space. But it allows you to basically view YouTube, stream YouTube in its 4K mode. While playing a video, you can bring up the quality menu and pick the 2160 setting, which is 4K, and then you're good to go if you want to watch it in 4K. So the other thing is you can also now jiggle your apps from anywhere. So it means you basically click on one app and you can basically move the apps around the screen, move to a different screen. The other thing you can do is a new app downloads location. which allows you to, you know, effectively add and remove apps to your app library and what have you, as you see fit, which I covered earlier. So the other thing you can do is, which I think is, you can change your screenshot opacity, which means that when you take a screenshot, you can mark the opacity of the actual screenshot in terms of how light or how dark you want it. That can be adjusted. The other thing you can do is basically is FaceTime eye contact. Now, if you're using FaceTime, which is generic to the iPhones, it reintroduces eye contact. Now, what will happen is it'll automatically adjust the video feed in a way to make it seem as if you're making eye-to-eye contact, basically looking directly at each other as opposed to looking at their cameras. So the other thing that you can do now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the other information I have, which is quite useful. The reason I didn't actually go through everything on here, because it's very comprehensive. I mean, it goes through about UI improvements, iOS improvements, you know. I don't think that's of any use to anyone necessarily. I think really what you want to know is certain key features. If you wanted to get more information, then I'm going to send these links over to Phil. You're welcome to click on the links. As of the time of me doing my research into them and looking at presenting this, they are correct. As you can imagine, the links do change from time to time. So, you know, at the moment they're all correct and they're all fine. Now, the only thing I was going to go through before I go from there was actually the improvements that what's been improved in iOS 14.5. So, what I've been going through just now is is actually iOS 14 to 14.5. Now, 14.5 effectively is the latest update. Now, anyone who's got an Apple phone that's compatible with iOS 14, I always recommend getting the latest updates. The reason for that is because there's certain security features which are introduced. Like Microsoft now, Apple are doing regular updates. This is because of various problems that have been identified. It's always good to have the latest operating system. It's very easy. You just go to your settings on your handset. So if you go to your Apple handset, you go and look on the settings, and then you go to general, and then you go to software update, and that will tell you whether or not your update is correct. Now, for example, on my Apple iPhone, the iOS 14.4.2 is the latest version, which is basically what it's saying is correct. So if you've got enough software that's available to download, that is the place you need to go to. So essentially what you're going to, you tap on your settings tab, you then scroll down, you'll see it says general, and then you click underneath about, you'll have software update, tap on that, and it will tell you whether or not you've got an update due. Now, the other thing I suggest is that you have automatic downloads, or the button switch to the right, and install iOS updates to your right. The reason for that is because when you're not using the handset at night, the iOS will download, providing you've got a Wi-Fi connection, and providing it can connect to the Wi-Fi, and providing it's plugged into the mains, or you've got enough battery power for it to do so. It will update your your actual software without you actually having any interaction with it. It'll automatically do it, and I think it's very useful because people who generally don't remember to do it, it's very handy to have. Now, when iOS was launched, basically there is these are useful features to know. They have something called Listen for Sounds on the Apple iOS, which I didn't know about until I started looking into this, what the iOS features are. Now, what that is basically is the accessibility feature on your, I don't know how many people have actually played around with the accessibility feature on their handset. Essentially, if you go down to your settings, no, it's not settings, is it? Actually, if you go down to your settings, if you go in settings, you go past notifications and you go down to, you'll have an accessibility tab. You tap on accessibility, you've got all sorts of accessibility options on there. You've got voiceover, spoken content. Now, in that, you will have a sound. You will have a basically an option to navigate to sound recognition. And if you go to sound recognition and you go to sounds, it's got 14 sounds it recognizes. Everything from sirens to smoke to fire to cats to dogs barking, everything is on there. And essentially, what your phone can do is it can recognize one of 4 different categories of sounds: alarms, animals, household, and people. The set of sounds will grow over the time, and machine learning. So what Apple have done in this particular, what they're doing now is something called machine learning. So as your machine is learning, it's like what Diane does with her dictation. As she's been using it so frequently over a period of time, machine learning has enabled her to have a better experience with using dictation on her device. Essentially, that's what machine learning does. So Diane, if I was to use Diane's phone to dictate, it will not recognize my voice as well as it would Diane's, because Diane's voice is, her machine has learnt how she pronounces certain words, the speed at which she pronounces over a period of time. That's a typical example of machine learning. And that's something that they've built into their software. And what the Apple notes that with this feature enabled, your iPhone will continuously listen for sounds. It's useful for various people. It can be very useful. I'm trialing it. I mean, I'm using it. So I'll let you know. I mean, it has already done. You know, I heard, there was somebody whose cat was well, my cat was meowing earlier, and it recognized that quite when I was upstairs, halfway up the stairs. So, but you know, now that's a very, I think that's a very useful feature for various people. But that gives you an idea of what's integrated into the iOS. Now, the other thing that you've got is a color picker. Now, why do you need a color picker? The reason is that when you've got certain when you're looking at your home screen, I think contrast is important for you to be able to see what you're actually looking at. And when you're outside, this enables you to actually, you have something called a, effectively what you do with that is you've got a standard color grid. It's basically a way of you selecting your colors for your whole setup and effectively having that user experience so you can see what you're doing. You can customize the color on your contrast and the reds, the greens and the blues in order for you to get a better experience in using the actual iOS. Now, I'm going to send a link for this as well to Phil. This is something that Diane will find useful. Now, the dictation shortcut on the where you can assign a keyboard shortcut for dictation. So if you open settings on your handset, go back to settings. All right, and if I go to general, yeah, where is it? General, go back again, go to general and keyboard, and it enables you to effectively, you know, you can basically do a dictation shortcuts on your well, actually on the iOS you can enable dictation, so you can do that. It also allows you to check, you know, auto correction and stuff like that. So it's useful to actually look into that. Right, what else do I want to go through? I think that's pretty much it, really, in terms of functionality. I think that gives you an overview of what you can do in terms of iOS. Now, if you've got a lot more questions about iOS, I will basically send you the details. Effectively, the most important thing I think with the iOS, one of the things is the accessibility features. You can make accommodations for different types of headphones you're using. Accessibility is important for people who've got dexterity problems, a whole host of, and I think this iOS 14, as I was doing my research, playing around with it, it's got a very useful set of accessibility features. It's not 100% great, but it is really good. Now, I don't know whether Diane's aware of this, but effectively, there's something called reduce loud sounds. It's called reduce loud sounds. This feature will automatically lower the headphone volume at a very specified decibel. So, for example, if you go to sounds and haptics, you go to iPhone settings, sound and haptics, it basically means that you are able to reduce, you can customize it from, let's say, 90 decibels. You can basically, it reduces loud sounds. The other thing you can use on accessibility on group FaceTime calls, it will basically give prominence to anyone who's using sign language. So if somebody's using sign language, that person gets prominence in a conversation they may be having with you using sign language, they get prominence. And as I said to you, you've also got the sound recognition, which is very useful to have. So now, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free.
Can you tell me, Dee, when I dictate, because I use the dictation all the time,
Yes.
if it's a proper noun, like a person's name, it very often comes up in capitals.
Have you got auto capitalization enabled in your
I don't know.
settings?
I don't know. It doesn't always, and sometimes it's when I'm just tapping in and I'm not always dictating.
So if you go to general,
yeah,
and if you go down to keyboard.
Wait a minute. Let me see general. Yeah, general keyboard.
And if you look at all keyboards, it's got auto capitalization.
Yeah. Oh, keyboard. Here we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's got auto capitalization.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. It's got auto correction.
So take the auto capitalization off.
Yes. And
okay.
Yeah. I mean, predictive. You've got also as well. Predictive is really annoying because you might say, router, and because if it's Americanized, say router. Or
yes.
Would they drop it or whatever? I think that's the other thing. So I mean, play around with it. Let me know how you get on. Yes. I know you use dictation.
Yeah.
A lot. So
yeah.
How are you finding it in terms of it recognizing what you're saying generally? Depending on I think one of my criticisms of dictation is you have to be in a relatively quiet environment to be able to use it. If you're anywhere slightly noisy or picking up the background, what's going in the background, you may not be able to hear properly.
Not entirely true, because I can, as long as I'm dictating into it and I don't stop talking, it will continue to dictate, to write what I've said. But for example, if the radio was on and I stop, it will hear what the radio says and will dictate that into my text. Right. Yeah. So as long as I keep talking, it dictates in and it cuts out the sound around. The other thing is accessibility. I use it for my hearing aids.
Yes, that's right, absolutely.
Yeah, so I have that on all the time. I've got my Starkey app, which I can use as well, which picks up on the Bluetooth. Okay. But iPhone also have one where I can swipe it up and I can adjust my hearing aids, or where you put your light on, you sweep it up, and you've got sound and brightness. I can do it there very quickly as well.
So what I was proposing to do is, if I do a session on Apple operating system, depending on which operating system you're using, the problem with operating systems in Apple is that they've come out. I've got the latest operating system installed on my. Oh, I just updated my one. So hold on. On my
ours is both on 1.4.2.
No, I'm talking about the Mac. I'm talking about your computer now, not your.
Oh, sorry.
So what I was going to cover was Siri. On that, when I do that, I'll cover Siri, because Siri's got very comprehensive use of features now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's something I was going to do. I'll do that at some other stage.
Can I ask you about Siri? David
Yeah.
uses it all the time. I don't. Because I think, does it use your data if you're outside?
No, I mean, it depends on what you're asking Siri to do. If you're asking Siri to, I don't know, put something on your calendar, no, because it's just accessing your calendar. If you're asking it to go find out something, then it's going to use the internet to find that out. So there will be a data usage of sorts, depending on what function it's performing. Yes, it can use your data, but it depends on what the function is. You know, Siri, can you tell me what the weather's going to be like tomorrow? Siri is going to have to look like, can you tell me how many countries are in the world, Siri? It's like Alexa. Even though my one's, it's not of any use at all. But yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're using it for. So yeah, the answer to that question is yes, it can use data, depending on what you're using it for.
Yeah. Okay. You use it all the time, don't you?
Any other questions? Ronnie, you got any questions?
The one I was going to ask.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's now rectified itself.
Okay.
Because
So
I couldn't get rid of one of the what do they call it? One of the apps. It just refused to go. But I thought, well, I'll just try it again. And when I tapped it, a new set of stuff came up. So obviously on the new updates, they've changed how to get rid of apps and things.
But you can only get rid of apps that you've downloaded, not those that come with the Apple phone. The Apple phone.
Yes, that's correct. So to an extent,
Yeah.
to an extent. But if
And
you
they
tap
go
on
to
your
the
screen,
cloud.
if you tap on your screen, keep your finger down on the app, what will happen is that it will tell you on there.
It shakes.
It shakes, or it will come up with edit home screen, share bookmark, or delete bookmark. Yeah, and depending on what you want to actually use, you should be able to effectively, to do that. So I mean, yeah, it should not be that difficult to be actually onerous to actually.
I found a couple of apps that I deleted because I wasn't using them. When I decided, I'll look for that particular app again, it was already in the cloud. So it just came back.
There's two ways. That's a good question, because with Apple, what they do now is they allow you to delete the actual physical app, but you don't delete the data. It's in the background. So in order for you to delete it completely, it gives you an option: delete completely. It means all the data goes, or you just delete that particular icon.
Yeah.
But your data remains in the background. So you can delete WhatsApp from but the WhatsApp will actually still be there. You'll still have it coming up, but you won't have the actual app on your sort of home screen, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I had that with Facebook because I don't use Facebook personally very much. David does now. And I couldn't find it because I'd put it in, you can put them into little libraries. And I had filed them under social media or something, and the Facebook disappeared, but I managed to get it back. I can't remember how. But it's quite handy having them in those little things, because then you don't have to keep sweeping across lots of screens in order to find the particular app.
Yeah.
But
I would recommend everyone who's got any kind of computer, but especially with the MacBooks, buy an external hard drive and back up their data onto it. Apple have got a feature called Time Machine. The Time Machine will back up the image of the entire computer and everything on it, in order for you to basically then, you can buy, like Phil said, you can buy a couple of terabyte hard drive now for probably under 100 quid. And that will last you for absolutely ages. And it's very useful to have it, because if you ever have a problem where I've seen so many people go into the Apple store. Oh, I didn't know. I thought the computer, my phone automatically backs up, or my computer does. He said, well, not really. It's not that intelligent that it's going to actually hop on the number 22 bus and go and get your pizza from Domino's. It's basically, you've got to actually make a physical backup of it. And the amount of people who lose data is actually astronomical. I haven't got a problem because I haven't got a huge amount. I've got all my photos are backed up into the cloud, but if I lose the only thing I'm going to lose is I won't even lose my emails, because my emails are backed up, because Google and Apple have a backup of them. So I haven't really got a great deal that I'm very worried about. Yeah, the music is probably the only thing, but to be honest with you, even that's kind of backed up to an extent anyway. So I mean, really, I think that's an important aspect to mention. That's nothing to do with the iOS. It's the personal when you use your device. This is really important to remember. And anyone got any questions? Anything else?
Any more questions?
No, thank you.
Ronnie's thinking
Ronnie?
of a question. She's on mute.
So I wanted to ask if I've got, we were talking about backup and getting everything backed up onto a hard drive from your computer or your phone.
Yeah.
But what about photos? Because sometimes you can get so many on your phone.
So are you talking about on your phone? But you've got two ways of backing it up. So if you've got a laptop, it doesn't have to be an Apple one or a PC. You can enable the backup to your PC by connecting it via cable. And it
So
will
I've got to
basically
get the right cable to connect the phone to
so you connect it to your
charger.
PC, and you just basically it'll back up your to your PC. Or alternatively, you use iCloud. Depending on how many photos you've got, you can subscribe to iCloud.
I've got iCloud on my phone.
Yeah.
I've got, because I kept on taking pictures and I kept on buying a bit more space.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing. I would say you can now back everything up to your laptop or your desktop, but I would then effectively back up that. You can then effectively shift it. Yeah, you can shift it from your desktop or laptop to your hard drive, so everything is stored on there. I think you can now. I believe you can get Bluetooth hard drives, so you can probably shift everything over. That should be something I need to look into, because I was thinking, well, if you can connect by Bluetooth to your hard drive, you can just shift everything over by Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Or Wi-Fi, basically. Yeah. So I do think that's another thing you can be doing. I mean, they may be more expensive, but like Phil was saying a number of times, he said that you can buy these hard drives now for virtually.
Yeah.
You probably don't need more than 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte maximum, depending how much data you use. But I think 1 terabyte is going to last you for a long time. Most people,
Yeah, as I've said before, I mean, I got a terabyte about 10 years ago, and I still haven't filled it up. So.
Yeah. So there you are. I mean,
Can you use your Apple charger, the wire, to go from your phone to your computer?
You should be able to, because it's got a USB slot on one end, and it's got the device slot on the other end. So yeah, you should be able to connect it to your laptop. Yes, absolutely.
Most of the chargers now, when they give you them, they've got a USB slot that fits.
Yeah. So you should have no issues with
the plug that goes into the socket. So you just unhook it from that and plug it straight into your laptop.
I would.
So that's the best way to download.
It's the old school method. Before they came out with iCloud and QCloud or whatever cloud, they used to have.
As you were saying, there's nothing theoretically to stop you uploading it to a cloud wirelessly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there's nothing to do there. And I think really you need to now back up your data. I mean, it's like, do you need we discussed this about, some weeks ago, we discussed about the antivirus, and I've gone through that. So effectively, I mean, it's useful to have it, because you don't know what's going to happen. Your device might go down tomorrow, and you've got that backup. The first thing they ask you in the Apple stores is, have you backed up your data? And I think it's important, really.
You have to pay for cloud though, because I know my cloud was full up, so they asked me to pay.
Yes, mine is. I think I pay about £6 a month. It's not cheap, but I mean, it's cheap per month. But I mean, if it's £72 a year, some people will not do that. I mean, like Phil said, you can get a terabyte hard drive, and for probably that kind of money or not less, and you can just basically back everything up yourself. And there's nothing to stop you doing it. You might pay a little bit more for a Wi-Fi enabled one, but effectively, it's your data is not in the cloud somewhere it can be compromised. Well, it's theoretically, you've got it in your own house. You just
as you said, I use my notes for what's in my freezer and in the cupboard, so I can keep a list for shopping. And then you've got the option to put it in the cloud or to just keep it on your phone. Those things. I noticed that it comes up. When I do a new note, do you want this in the cloud or do you want it on your phone? So some things that I'm not bothered to keep, I just put on my phone.
Yes, I mean, that's the thing about it. I mean, I would imagine that you should be able to do that. I think the third-party apps now, where if you've got a hard drive, you can keep certain things on the hard drive and certain things on your. I mean, like your photos, you can keep everything on your hard drive. And I mean, some people have 30, 40 gig worth of photos, so you can just keep them on there. And I think that's something useful. I mean, so yeah, I think that's something that should be done, really, essentially.
And the photos, you can select albums, put them into because if you've got a lot of photos and you want to find something, you can put them into albums. But also on the iPhone, if you put in, say you're looking for a dog, you just put dog in, and all the pictures that have a dog in it will come up.
Yeah,
which is quite handy.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that, because my friend's neighbor, she's got a 3-year-old daughter, and she's got pictures of Mr. Wolf, and she goes, Mr. Wolf is so. She says Mr. Wolf and it comes up,
Yeah.
So
And also, I have the tips, and so every once in a while I'll try and learn something new. And the other day, it was telling you about naming people on your phone. I mean, I've already named quite a lot, but it said you swipe, you go to the picture you want to name, and then you swipe up. But when the picture is not a close-up, it doesn't seem to want to name the person. If it's a close-up, it's easy. You can just swipe and then go to name this person. But I had a picture of somebody standing with a big background, and I wanted to put his name in. I couldn't do it. So I don't know.
It's interesting. It's a very useful feature, because there is a technology being developed for blind people, where basically it's all done on a machine. So what will happen is that the character recognition, you'll say, all right, Phil's come, and then the lady's saying, can you describe Phil? Or he's got a beard, he's got glasses, and there's certain key features that Phil might have that picks up on, and then it's like, oh yes, you can let him in, and so they are developing this technology now. I think it's been developed in I think there's a MIT developing it, and a couple of universities around. So I think the whole way that's going to change, because it basically, the way in which we interact, people who've got, not necessarily blind people who've got, compromised vision, it basically creates a safe environment. Yeah, so it is something that's very useful, actually, and I do think that that's the way it's going, and I think it's really handy. I mean, even like Rani, if Rani was at home, unlikely to be on her own, she waits for a carer, so it'll say, right, there's a camera will say, right, Rani, you've got a new carer comes, and not a regular one. And she'll say, all right, okay, who is it? Oh, it's a carer. And if she's been once before, it'll recognize her, say, and tell her yes, and so these are things that have been developed. So I think they're very useful to have. It comes under accessibility again. And I think, that comes into, like, again, having that sort of, safety, sort of, having that sort of comfort of knowing that you've got technology which will step in, basically.
The other thing for blind people, we've got a blind friend, it will read what's on the phone.
Yes. God, yeah.
So you can actually, I mean, there's a book that I read, and I can get it to read it to me, or I can read it myself, it's quite handy. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, I think that's the other thing they're doing now as well, is the technology I was talking about, they're developing things that you can enable a blind person to use a handset. You have the handset, it's got the software which is built in, or the technology is built in, so right, ring fill up, and ring sound person, and it gives them that sort of, so there's lots of things that are happening in the background which I think are really useful. And I think that's why I've always said technology should be there to empower people, it's not there just to push buttons, and that's what I think.
One of the things they were talking about in those Windows 10 classes.
Oh yeah, that Windows 10
where they had a lot of accessibility options.
It's like Teams. When we went to Teams training, the guy never answered my question about accessibility. I remember asking that question, it never got answered. But I mean, I think these things are really useful. I I think one of the things they're looking at is with the advent of the, because of the pandemic and the ongoing issues, they're looking at ways in which individuals can be picked up if they're looking ill or they're looking distressed, that picks up and it notifies a safe contact using video conferencing. I think that's something that somebody's looking at developing, because, that's another thing that they're actually looking at, which I think is really useful,
By the way, on Word 10, the dictation mode works very well.
Okay, that's good.
But I've only tried it on Word. I tried it on Excel and it wouldn't work, if I remember, on that. But it will work on Word.
Okay, that's great.
So I need to explore that a little more.
I think it's really good. I think it's really handy to have it. I do think that, especially people who've got dexterity issues. I mean, it's like, I heard somebody applied for a 111 job. They got the job, but then they were, because of their typing, because they've got arthritis, they were not allowed to. And I think that, I don't know whether that's going to, I think they've made an accommodation for it, but they couldn't very well kick them out because they can't type very quickly because you've got arthritis. That would be discrimination, you know? So I do think that there is software out there now which enable you to help you, do it, so I do think.
Can I ask you about, you were talking about visual. David was saying he found the color of the newsletter, the yellow, was not very easy for him to read, as there's a few of you there. Can you tell me what you think about that?
I don't think it's particularly easy to pick up sometimes for me, because I've got damage to my left eye, which, I've got whatever I've got now on my left eye is, I haven't got full I've got peripheral damage to the eye, around the periphery, thankfully, but not centrally. But it can be difficult. I think you need to use a high contrast black. There is ways of doing it. Play around with the colors. What I'll do is I'll go on the RNIB website and see what they recommend for newsletters and color. What color should a newsletter be for people who've got? I think that might be useful.
I think it's dark blue, isn't it, on yellow? That is one of the colors, But I'll just go back to white.
Yes, I think, to be honest with you, it's nice to have all this sort of color. But I do think that, it's just sometimes when depending, where your eye picks up certain colors, it can be a little bit difficult sometimes. And I do think that's one of the reasons I haven't had my license, because of the issues. I've got to wait until I go back and have my test done in September, which should be fine, hopefully. But essentially, arthritis can damage eyes. My consultant said, in the absence of any other explanations, your eyes can be affected by arthritis. I didn't even know that until I went. So any other questions, anyone?
Any other questions, David? No, thank you. That was very useful.
Okay, no worries.
Have
a good weekend.
If you get the links over to me, I'll put on the website.
No, all right, thanks a lot.
Anybody wants to access that, you can look at it there.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Okay, see you Tuesday.
Have a good weekend. See you Tuesday. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.